Okay, no more fooling around. Pa, this is Bart. I wish for
A prequel to Breath of the Wild.
So out of nowhere today, we received a new trailer for a certain Zelda game.
Is it Breath of the Wild 2? Finally.
Nope! You wish. It is not Breath of the Wild 2. It is not that sequel that we are all anxiously awaiting that we haven't heard anything about since June of last year. But it is Breath of the Wild related. We got new information on a game called Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, coming out in just a couple months, and this is a game about the Calamity event that happened 100 years before Breath of the Wild. But there's a major twist to what this game is, and that is that this is not a normal Zelda game. No, this is a Dynasty Warriors game, just like the original Hyrule Warriors was.
Yeah, I liked Hyrule Warriors quite a bit, and I'm excited for this one, especially because it doesn't seem to be a fan fiction this time.
It does not. This is absolutely something that is much more closely tied to the proper Zelda series, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, go in depth on that. And I'm excited about it. I actually don't much care for the Warriors games in general, but seeing it being presented as more information on the backstory of Breath of the Wild is super interesting to me. What a cool idea. And right off the bat, we see they are really trying to make this look like Breath of the Wild. You know, Hyrule Warriors had a very distinct style to it. It was kind of close to Twilight Princess, but not really. They really did it their own way and adapted the characters into that style. But they basically took the models and shaders straight out of Breath of the Wild and plopped them straight into this new game. So it looks exactly the same. Cutscenes look the same way. It runs basically exactly the same way that you would have thought Breath of the Wild did. Obviously, it'll be faster combat because this is a Warriors game, but otherwise, yeah, it looks very familiar. We even get some of the graphical problems from Breath of the Wild in there, as there's like some pop-in with the trees, and some of the trees actually look really gross, but otherwise, it looks beautiful. I think it looks great. I'm happy to see more of this world. I don't know. What about you? Do you like that they're just keeping the same style from Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, I do. I think that, like you said, it looks very reminiscent of Breath of the Wild, and so much so that, you know, some of the very initially in the cutscenes, they show cutscenes from what I assume was the flashback in Breath of the Wild, and they also have the same lines, the same voiceover, where, you know, you are now ready to hear what happened 100. So at first I just thought, oh, these are some Breath of the Wild cutscenes, flashback things, and then I started noticing, wait a minute, these are some of these stuff is new. So it looks very similar, and I think for everyone who liked Breath of the Wild, this is just going to be up their alley.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very clear that they're working very closely with the Zelda team on this, not just because of what we're seeing with this art style, but they actually straight up said that too, which is a big surprise considering the last Hyrule Warriors game. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
So they said indeed that they're working closely with the Zelda team at every step of the development. So that means everything from the story to the setting, the world, the characters, gameplay mechanics. So I think what we can see, most importantly, is that this game will probably be very faithful to Breath of the Wild. So you could imagine that if they were just making their own thing, they were just kind of, oh, let's just make up the event of the Calamity as we go along. But Eiji Aonuma said that, you know, they had ideas for the Calamity that they didn't really show in Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, as you remember, it pretty much went like, Ganon returned, the Guardians turned against us, and then we lost, and everyone died. But here, it seems like they're gonna flesh it out, and I think that the original development of Breath of the Wild had a lot of details, at least on paper, as to what exactly occurred, and they're probably gonna take that, change it around a bit, and flesh it out.
I'm really excited for that too, because we even see, for example, the Guardians coming out of those big spires around Hyrule Castle in the trailer, and that was something that was talked about in Breath of the Wild in the, I think it was in one of the journals maybe that had referenced that, how that's what they were there for, was to hold those Guardians except for an emergency, and then bam, we see them pooping out of that big old spire. I'm excited to see that they're basically making this game canon. Like, this isn't going to be like Hyrule Warriors, which was just like pulling from everywhere and just throwing whatever they want out there just because it's like, hey, do whatever you want. It's a multi-dimensional thing. It's not real. This is very much looks like it's going to be an actual backstory for Breath of the Wild that will be considered the de facto telling of that story.
Yeah, and that's also why you had the origin of this game being Eiji Onuma approaching the team at Koei Tecmo and being, hey, wouldn't this be a cool thing? And they were like, yeah, and then they did it. So I think it definitely came from Eiji Onuma and the Cella team being like, hey, we want to explore the setting more. And a Warriors game is the right way of doing it.
Yeah, definitely, because they're busy at work on Breath of the Wild 2, trying to make that come out, and so yeah, why not get this story told by someone else with the right tools? And I definitely think that this does make a lot of sense for a Warriors style game. Like, it's a war. It was something that destroyed all of Hyrule and involved all the races. So you got all these people fighting together. It makes perfect sense for a warrior style game to have this kind of story being told. And so I'm very excited to see it told in its entirety. I'm excited to see some of the things that were just talked about but not actually seen in Breath of the Wild. It's going to be very cool. And with that, the Calamity itself, that really destroyed a lot of Hyrule. It really messed up a lot of things. The Guardians were running everywhere, crushing stuff. They were just just a big mess. Hyrule was left a big mess. You leave the Great Plateau and you wander around and you just see ruins everywhere of what used to be there, of like Hyrule Castle Town being destroyed and all these other locations that just aren't there anymore. And we see in this game that this starts off well before that happens. In fact, this even takes place before the Calamity itself happens. I know the Calamity is going to be like a big climax in this game, but we definitely get plenty of lead up to it, because we see Link before he's even chosen as the knight that will wield the Master Sword. We see him in regular old knight armor like the rest of Hyrule's knights. He's got a regular old sword. He hasn't been given his champion's clothes yet. He hasn't been given the Master Sword yet. So this is all happening well before that. And we just see we see various monsters cropping up. We see the Yiga clan doing their thing. Not the Guardians that have been overtaken yet, but we see the precursor to that. So I don't know how much time they're gonna spend on that precursor section, but we're gonna at least get a good amount of time with it, which is great. That means we're gonna be able to see more of the story leading up to it. A lot of the in-between the cutscenes that we saw in Breath of the Wild. I don't know. I'm hoping that we'll get to see the recruiting of the champions as well, personally. I think that would be really cool to touch on. We saw a little bit of that in the second DLC for Breath of the Wild. We saw a little bit of that recruiting process, but we even saw at one point in this trailer, Revali and Link fighting is what it looked like. Revali basically flips over Link's head and points an arrow right at the back of his head, while Link takes a slash at him. So we saw Zelda's side of recruiting them, but we never saw Link's side. So I think that would be really interesting to see his perspective as well, because, obviously Link and Revali kind of hate each other. So I'd like to see how he reacted with all the other champions as well.
They're probably going to have to change a couple things. So what I said in the beginning was I think that this game is going to stay very faithful to the story as portrayed in Breath of the Wild. I think, though, that they're going to kind of have to change a couple of things. When Link went to recruit the champions and everything, there were no real signs of there was a big war going on, guys. But obviously that's going to have to be the plot here. So I think they're going to change a couple things like that, but nothing really too crazy. Not anything, Master Sword sleeps forever kind of retcon.
Yeah, I think all the things that they would need to change, you could reasonably explain away if they do change them. Kind of like how, where was the goddess Hylia throughout Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess? And it's like, they just didn't talk about her. Okay, cool, that's fine. She shows up again all these years later, but all right. So I think it's going to be kind of like that. It's like, yeah, maybe they didn't necessarily talk about these things in Breath of the Wild, but they didn't not talk about them, or, however that works.
We know that the champions are going to play a role in the game. You can actually play as these champions. We see actual gameplay with... did we see all of them, or almost all of them?
We did. We saw every single one of them. We saw Mipha doing a cool water torrent attack. We saw Daruk doing a bunch of spires coming out of the ground. We saw Revali up in the air shooting arrows at folks. And then we saw Urbosa doing a flurry rush of all things. Apparently Link's not the only guy that could do flurry rushes. Urbosa was able to do that too.
The obvious elephant in the room is that all these champions are gonna die.
They sure are. It's we can't 100% say this, but it looks like we see in the trailer a few scenes of them right before they die. Like we see Urbosa falling down, with the scene immediately before that is Link reflecting something with electricity, so that could have been Thunderblight Ganon. We see the other champions kind of looking like, oh no, what's that? Revali's getting hit by he's kind of singed by a laser which would be coming from Windblight Ganon.
Yeah.
So it looks like, yeah, they are showing, it's like, yeah, we're going to show them die, basically. We are going to show the actual death of the champions in this game.
Yeah, and if that also holds true, then what do you think kind of the end game is for it? Because we know that after the champions die, Link gets taken out, and at the very end, it's just Zelda, and she goes to the castle to stop Ganon. And we do see at the very end of this trailer something that could be that.
Yes.
Where she just holds a big light up, and she's like, I have to protect everyone. That could either be a cutscene just at the very end, but I mean, like you said, we kind of have an idea of where this starts, with Link being a regular knight fighting off a bunch of monsters, but after that, it becomes a lot more muddy. But I think there's still a lot of content, a lot of bosses that they're going to show off, so there's an adventure here for sure.
Yeah, and the neat thing so far, or I say neat, but I don't know if it's necessarily neat, but everything we've seen so far is stuff that we have seen before. Basically, all the champions, all the monsters, all the enemies, all the everything was in Breath of the Wild. In fact, the only thing that wasn't in Breath of the Wild that we saw in this trailer is the Sheikah that was bowing behind Zelda and Link. They were standing in front of the king, and that Sheikah is probably Impa, almost definitely Impa. Like, if it's not Impa, I'll eat my hat. But it's the only other Sheikah it would likely be is possibly Pura, the short one who had the camera and all that. It could be her too, but I'm going to say probably not. I'm going to say it's almost definitely Impa. So we see that returning. We also see the runes returning. We see Zelda specifically is using the Sheikah Slate against the Lionel. She uses the Stasis rune. And Link somehow is using runes without a Sheikah Slate. He uses the Bomb rune, which it's not the first time we've seen runes being used without Sheikah Slate. The members of the Yiga clan, specifically Koga, was able to use runes as well. Without a Sheikah Slate. So I don't know.
I mean, he could have just eaten the Sheikah Slate.
You're right. Maybe he was fat enough to have eaten many things in his life. So I don't know exactly how Link's doing it, because obviously in Breath of the Wild he was using the slate to do all his runes. So I don't know. I don't know how he's doing it in this case, but the runes are back. At least we see Stasis and Bomb. At the very least, we may see Magnesis and Cryonis as well.
I think so as well. They did say that Breath of the Wild broke a lot of conventions when it comes to Zelda, as we all know. And I think that's something that they really want to take care of and emulate also in this game. So in the first Hyrule Warriors, you had things like, regular bows and bombs and fire rods and all these kinds of traditional Zelda items from a variety of games. Whereas here, there's still a lot of weapons to choose from swords and boomerangs and spears and fire rods and thunder rods and ice rods and rods. But yeah, so I think they're gonna take the Sheikah Slate. That's gonna be kind of one of the kind of core gameplay mechanics. I think all champions are gonna have their own kind of variations of the runes.
Yeah, at the very least, they'll have some kind of cool special abilities on their own. Like, we can expect to see their champion abilities appear, I'm sure, in one way or the other. And in addition, they seem to have the basic elemental abilities that you would associate with them. Abersa will probably have several lightning attacks. We see Mipha using her water to do stuff. So, yeah, I'm sure they'll have plenty of attacks related to ways that we've seen them use their abilities before, but expanded. And even their weapons, Mipha wields tridents. There's plenty of spears and tridents in Breath of the Wild. There's plenty of those big stone crushers for Daruk to use. They do have a lot of pools to use from, so there's plenty to take from there. Even the locations that we've seen so far, obviously we're going to see those come straight from Breath of the Wild. I don't think we're going to get anything necessarily new, but we will see at least some restored ones. Like, we see Lon Lon Ranch has been restored in one scene. Other than that, we see Hebra appear when Link's fighting with Rivali. We see a few others. We see Central Hyrule a bunch. We see Zora's Domain. We see Gerudo Town. We see what appears to be a valley in Tabantha, or Tabantha, however that's pronounced. I don't know. They never say it out loud. Basically, anything you saw in Breath of the Wild is going to be fair game. If you saw it there, it may show up here in some way or the other. So yeah, like you say, all those boomerangs, all those different rods, those various weapons that we had will show up in some way or the other, and we'll see there will be no shortage of abilities for these characters. Now, we've only seen these 6 playable characters so far. And I would be pretty surprised if Impa didn't make it in as well. She's a pretty likely candidate for another playable character, but I don't know. Do you think there's anyone else that is very likely to get in? I obviously have a wish list. Like, I want Beetle to get in there. Do I think he'll get in there? I don't know. Maybe. We'll find out. But, like, is there anyone else likely that you would see as a playable character in this game?
So I'll list this in two kind of in two categories. One is DLC, because remember the original Hyrule Warriors got a fair share of DLC content.
Oh, that is so true. We're gonna get plenty of DLC out of this.
Yeah, so I'm thinking Beetle, not unlikely for DLC. So when it comes to core playable characters, like you said, there will be the 6, Link, Zelda, 4 champions. I think Impa is a likely candidate. We could also see the other researchers, perhaps.
Robbie and Pura.
I mean, I think Raul would be kind of cool. He would, kind of ride around in a mech or something, or have his own guardian.
Oh my gosh, that would be so great. I would love that. I mean, we do see that the Divine Beast will be around, so why not other mechs? Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. How about a very young Prince Sidon?
That would be adorable. That would be so great. Have the little baby Prince Sidon fighting. Oh my goodness, I would love that. I was talking to Dave earlier today as well. And, we're like, oh, what if the King's playable? And
yeah,
I just hope, modders out there, if you're listening, if the King is playable in this game, you know what you have to do.
Yeah. Yep. There is only one thing that can and must be done.
There is one new character that we've seen that did not appear in the trailer at all. It only appeared in the artwork. And I'm being very hopeful to think that, oh, maybe this will be a playable character, but both Hombre and I kind of know what we think he is. And we're talking about the Guardian Egg, as he appears to be. It's obviously some kind of small Guardian type entity that's shaped like an egg.
So you know it's friendly.
Exactly, you know it's friendly. He's right there standing with Link, and Hombre, go ahead and tell us, what do we think that thing is?
This will 100% be Link's, little annoying robot companion that speaks for him, like Proxy in Hyrule Warriors, because Link doesn't talk very much, so someone has to be like, yes, I agree, let's go here, and that'll be him.
No, do you think it's going to have a robot voice?
Yeah, and I do, and I also predict that it will be called the Nagging Artificial Voice Intelligence, or Navi for short.
Oh my gosh. That's so exactly how it's going to be. I don't need a Fee 2.0. Thank you very much. Man, I didn't even realize it could use a robot voice. That's gonna suck. So that's all the stuff that we see from the trailer and everything that's in the game, right? But then it comes down to, I don't know, what do we think about this? It's obviously pretty out of left field. I don't think I expected a new Hyrule Warriors game to begin with. I just kind of thought that was a one and done thing. Nintendo was going to throw their IPs around to other people and do things. And we had Cadence of Hyrule that just came out, What was that, last year? That happened and was like, oh, that's cool. So Nintendo's just kind of experimenting to see what sticks. And apparently Hyrule Warriors stuck. I remember that being a fairly successful, on the Wii U. I know it was one of the more successful games on the Wii U. And the definitive edition also did pretty well. So I guess, people are eating it up. Which, great. Glad to see it. Unfortunately for me, I don't care. I do not care for Warriors games. I'm not much of an action game kind of guy. I don't when I say that, I mean straight action games. Things like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, that kind of stuff. It just does not appeal to me as much, where you're just kind of going from level to level and just kicking the crap out of everything with these insane combos. It looks cool, it looks impressive, but it's just not my type of game. I definitely prefer a game where I can run around and explore and look for things, and definitely have action in there, but not have that be the main focus of the game. I want the main focus of the game for me to be exploration, and this being a Warriors game, I don't think we're going to see that. I don't think we're going to be wandering around the world. I think we're just going to get taken from location to location and being all right, now do this set of missions, and that's fine. I think the good thing, though, that I'm really excited about is that what Hyrule Warriors did not have going for it that this game does have going for it is that tie with the Zelda team, and that this is actual canon story that we're going to be getting here. It may, again, how canon will be hard to say at this point. I'm expecting it to honestly, I'm going to treat it as canon based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah,
and
unless you see something crazy.
Right, unless there's just something completely out. If Sia shows up, then I don't consider it canon anymore. But unless we see something like that, and I'm sure maybe they might do some goofy stuff with the DLC, which that's fine. But if the main story seems like perfectly in line with Breath of the Wild, like I'm gonna love it. And I'm gonna be enticed to keep playing it just for that, just to get more out of the Zelda experience. Because I know that was a big complaint with people with Breath of the Wild, was just the lack of story. And while that wasn't a complaint that I had, because I'm like, yeah, shut up, stop talking to me and let me explore. That's all I want to do. That was something that a lot of people had a problem with, especially when you had a game like Skyward Sword was the last major Zelda game to come out before that on a console. And that was a lot of story. That was a lot of talking, and people enjoyed that. People may have not enjoyed other parts of Skyward Sword so much, but they did enjoy getting to have the story side of it. So that'll be nice. That'll entice me to play. That'll get me through it. I'm looking forward to it in that respect. I'll definitely like it more than Hyrule Warriors, since Hyrule Warriors was, I don't know if we said it already, but basically a fanfic.
Yeah,
it
was a decent fanfic.
Yeah,
it was definitely a fanfic.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. In terms of the Warriors gameplay, I enjoyed the first one quite a bit, mainly for the sake of its gameplay. Like you said, the story was kind of like, I played it along. I was like, all right. And then some parts I was like, yeah. And it's like, Ganondorf got all the pieces of the Triforce, which summoned an army of monsters. Like, what? No, that's not what the Triforce does.
Well, Breath of the Wild even gets a Triforce wrong. It's like, oh, we can use this thing to steal Ganon, and it's like, no. Do you guys understand that's like an artifact of unimaginable power that could do anything in the entire world? I don't know. That's a whole other topic for a whole other day.
Yeah, for sure. Here's the final question. Do you think that this game will in any way relate to the sequel? I have two ideas on this.
Absolutely. Oh, gosh. Yes, I do. Go ahead. Tell me your ideas, because I think they will throw hints in there.
One thing I think that it'll do is that if this game is going to have a little bit of a kind of sadder, darker storyline with everyone dying or losing at the end, it's kind of a convenient test run to see how the audience will react to that, because typically Zelda games are very happy in the end. We have some things like Majora's Mask was like, okay, some parts are still a little sad. There's a few characters who didn't make it in the end. But for the most part, everything's happy and everyone's nice. And this game is not going to be that. It can't be that. Because then it wouldn't be the Calamity. So I wonder if they're going to kind of do as a test run to see how audience react to something that's a bit sadder, where everyone loses or at least doesn't win in the end. And if audience reacts well to it, maybe they'll kind of go in that direction a bit with the Breath of the Wild 2. And the reason I say that is just because the reveal trailer really seemed to have a bit of a more grim tone to it. So that's one thing that I thought. And the other thing is, I think that this is the perfect opportunity for them to just kind of drop a little kind of backstory hint, something in there to like, hey, did you see this rune with the guy on the horse with the trident? What's that all about?
Yeah, I fully expect that to be thrown in, some kind of mention to Ganon's actual body, whether it be in like some text or like other inputs like, hey, you guys see this weird passage about how there's a mummy under Hyrule Castle?
What if just Cass comes along? He'll be playable in DLC as well, by the way. He'll attack with musical notes. But he'll be like, hey, have you heard this weird song? And he'll sing you a song about Ganondorf.
I come from the future to tell you a song. That is a good point, though, on Cass, because his teacher might be in this game, who is, of course, a rival for Zelda's love with Link. So maybe we'll get a little B-plot about that. I don't know. We'll see. But I definitely think we're going to see some stuff about Breath of the Wild 2 thrown in there, specifically about Ganondorf, not Calamity Ganon, but Ganondorf. I think they're going to probably talk more about him being a Gerudo in the past. That was a brief mention in Breath of the Wild. But I think that they're going to kind of talk more about the history of Ganondorf and not necessarily just Calamity Ganon. Because, it'll tie right into this. And this is basically, it's like an appetizer, right? Like, that's what this game is everyone wants Breath of the Wild 2, but Breath of the Wild 2 can't come out right away. I'm sure it got internally delayed thanks to a lot of the events that happened earlier this year.
For sure.
So, I was kind of thinking, that might come out like the holiday 2020 when it first got announced last year.
Yep.
And now it's like, no, I definitely don't think that.
Yeah. Now it's. I was thinking maybe if we're lucky, holiday 2020, but most likely 2021. Now I'm kind of thinking if we're lucky, 2021, possibly 2022.
Yes, at the very least, they haven't given us a release date of any kind yet, which I appreciate because that way they don't have to delay anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're like, I think they realized that earlier in the year and were like, hey, we should do a game because this is going to take a while. They're like, well, we don't have enough room to do a game. Like, oh, what about those Koei Tecmo guys? And bam, get that out, give us a nice appetizer. And so I feel like this was late enough into development of Breath of the Wild 2 to where they're going to be able to incorporate stuff from Breath of the Wild 2 into this. Yeah. That's going to happen in there, so.
Yeah. I think the only thing that won't happen is that they won't figure everything out, because then there's no mystery for Breath of the Wild 2. But I think what they might do is kind of, throughout this game, perhaps find some old books or something that Zelda has, and then those books will be used in the sequel to be like, according to these old books, this is where we have to go. So, and those books will contain some images or some passages or something that will just be briefly mentioned in Hyrule Warriors.
Right. Yeah, I think that's totally going to happen in some way or the other. It'd be crazy for them not to, right? Because you want to get people continually excited about Breath of the Wild 2. So
yeah, especially for the people who might not be aware that there's a sequel. I mean, I don't know how many people those are, but I think there's probably a fair amount of gamers who are just kind of, they're very casual. They'll get, new Zelda game for Christmas, great, and they'll play it, and I like Breath of the Wild, and it's like, wait, oh, is there going to be another one? Wow. I'm going to keep tabs on this now. So, I mean, it's definitely a marketing opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. So, I think one way or the other, I'm excited that we're getting new Zelda content, that we're getting it so fast out of nowhere. Like, I love that Nintendo's been doing that recently, where they've just been kind of like, hey, guess what? New game. See it in 2 months. It's like, great. Okay. Like, they did that with friggin' Paper Mario, and I wasn't personally enthused about Paper Mario, but it was still like, oh, that's a big thing to be announcing out of nowhere.
Sure. to be fair though, I mean, these were all games that would have been at E3 had there been an E3 this year.
Most likely, but I don't know. I kind of hope this trend continues because while I do like being hyped for things, I don't necessarily like being strung along for years about things, exactly, or even a huge amount of time. So I don't know. I've been enjoying this new idea of, guess what, new game, bam, here it comes. Just enough to get you excited for it, get the hype talking about it, because 2 months is enough time to talk about a game.
Yeah, and save up some cash if you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy about that. So either way, good stuff. New Zelda game. Looking forward to it. I'll probably play it a bit on this channel when it comes out. If it's got online co-op, I'll probably play it with you, but I don't think it'll have online co-op. We'll see. I don't. Apparently, there's going to be another update on the 26th for whatever. I don't know. I guess they didn't really specify what that update would be or anything.
No, but I assume it's going to be, probably going to show off some extended gameplay. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, probably so. And then, of course, obviously, the optimist in all of us is like, oh, maybe they'll show a Zelda 2 trailer or Breath of the Wild 2 trailer at the end of that. And it's like, maybe. I'm not going to get my hopes up.
You know what would
I'm
be
not
awesome,
be like
though, actually? You know what would be really awesome? Is if there was a Breath of the Wild 2 trailer when you beat the game.
That would be sick. That's
it would be uploaded on YouTube after day one and spoiled, kind of.
Obviously.
Anyway.
But that would be so much fun. That kind of stuff would be great. That's a great reward for beating a game. That would, just a little ad for the next one. It's like, like at the end of some of the movies when you see a trailer for the next one and you're like, oh, snap. Or like the stings that Marvel movies do for that, hint at oh my gosh, they're going to do that. honestly, if they could do a trailer sting and like something to do with like Ganondorf even, like, or I mean an end credit sting, that would be so cool. Yeah. I'd be way down for that. So we'll see. So we'll if there's enough information to talk about after that next update, you know, I might do more, might not. It just depends on how much they really talk about. Like, I don't want to do this if it's like, oh, we'll just read the whole trailer to you. And it's yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. In the meantime, though, Hombe de Mundo, where people can find you on a certain page on Steam. Where's that?
Yes. Buy my game. Me and my wife made a game, and you should buy it because it's fun.
It is fun. It's a ton of fun. It's a blast. Great local co-op. So definitely check that out. Mayhem Masters on Steam. Give it a shot. If you like Bomberman, you will love it. It's a really good time. I've been playing it with some other random friends whenever they come over to the house now, which, you know, unfortunately isn't as often as it used to be, but thanks to circumstances. But yeah, great local couch player, and you can do Steam Remote Play to do it with your friends from afar as well. So check that out, Mayhem Masters. Obviously, you could follow me by subscribing to this channel right here. Do it. Pretty much, yeah, do it. That's the only place I do Zelda stuff. So if you want to see more Zelda stuff, subscribe here. If you want to see Digimon stuff, you know, find me anywhere else. But you probably don't. That's why I made a second channel, so you didn't have to see the Digimon stuff. But yeah, thanks for watching. Tell us what you think about the trailer in the comments below. If you saw anything particularly cool, let us know what that might be. And yeah, we will talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.